Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Design Recharge. It's an early one. This is episode 373. I'm really excited to have Joana Galvão. You can say it now.
Galvão?
Yeah. Galvão.
Thank you for having me, Dan.
Even better. I'm so excited to have her on because there are certain things that she has learned in 6 years of running a business that I'm learning now. And she's telling how she fell on her face and how she soared. And so I want to know the nitty gritty so I don't have to fall on my face. And I thought that you guys would enjoy this as well. She didn't fall on her face that much because she didn't damage anything, right?
But not literally.
but I love that you're willing to share where you had these, but you have had, because you didn't give up. You kept trying. I love you have an attitude of nothing was too good for you. Like you'll do whatever. Let's learn. Let's just take it all in. And so I love that. I love this. But can you give them a little bit of an idea of how you came into the design industry and then when you started your business?
So I went to university for graphic design and photography in London, studied at Kingston University. And at the end of the degree, we always put together like a design show, and we sent invites to all the big agencies to come see our work. And that's how a lot of us get our first job. And that's how I got my first job at a small design agency in London. Before that, like in the interim, in the summer, I did an internship at an interior design agency, which was fun and different because I was working with interior designers and then like doing all the, signage like this for restaurants and the logos for shops and things like that. Then I did freelance for a family. For a 16-year-old girl who has a really great charity. She's now no longer 16, but it was funny at the time that like my first client was 16-year-old driven and ambitious, business lady. And then I had, and then I did another internship at a bigger agency of like 150 plus. So I didn't work for that long in the industry, but I liked that I got to experience like a little bit of everything, like being an in-house designer, being a designer for an interior design firm, and then big and small agency. At this small agency, I was loving it. I never thought I was going to quit it because I loved my boss. I loved the projects we were working on. I loved the team I was working with. Like I still keep in touch with some of them, but I was craving more freedom. I wanted more autonomy in what projects we took on. I wanted to talk more with the clients. I wanted to, work on maybe a little bit different projects that excited me. And I wanted to go back home to Portugal more often, be in the sun, go travel, like all these things that I felt quite constricted by in my job. Not to mention the 1.5-hour commute that I would do each way. It all started to play into like, okay, maybe there's something else out there. And, I think it was thanks to the commute in retrospect that, commute can be a blessing and a curse because it's such a waste of time, but at the same time, it was precious thinking time. It was time for me to read and consume podcasts and all the things. And that's where I started to watch a lot of videos on Marie Forleo's channel, who opened up my eyes to the possibility of maybe one day having an online business. And it was when she was launching her online course, B-School, which I know Eva, who's live, she took it this year as well and experienced similar results. It was thanks to her launch that someone saw one of my comments on the YouTube video. She does like the 3-part video sequence that a lot of people who launch online courses do. And in one of them, she wrote, she asked us to finish this sentence. So wouldn't it be great if, and this is a great exercise for anyone listening, like, wouldn't it be great if, because it helps you think positively. Like, wouldn't it be great if I magically landed this big name client, or if I got this, I still do it to this day. And so I wrote in the comments, wouldn't it be great if I magically got some freelance clients to get me enough money to enroll in B School? Now, B School is like a $2,000 investment. I think it's a little more now. And one woman saw my comment and she clicked on my website. She liked my work. It was just my university portfolio. It was not even a client-facing website. And she said, well, I don't have $2,000, but I have 800. Does that buy me a logo? And that was my first client. And I was like, oh, well, I played it cool. I was like 800. I was freaking out. I was like, oh my God, yes. Like I'm almost halfway there to enrolling in B School. So I like created this. I was like, well, I can't just deliver the one logo for 800. I have to like create this whole experience to make it worth all this money. In my head, it's like 800. That's like almost a month's salary. That's so much money. So I created like all the things, all the bells and whistles, gave her the best experience I possibly could. And she was so happy that, just right after our first call, she's like, I love this. This has been such a great experience already. Like I'm going to go post about this in the Facebook group and tell everybody about you. And that's how I got like 3 more clients that week. And I was able to make the $2,000 in like a week to join B School. So that was how I started into design, and that was what launched my business.
You had graduated, you had heard about Marie through just by commuting, right? You had time, you were processing, learning
just
things.
Browsing YouTube. Yeah.
Right. So then from that, so it's being bold about posting on something that you normally think no one's going to read these YouTube comments, right? But you never know. So sometimes it's just about being honest and stepping out. And instead of thinking that you're just this number or these thousands of comments in this, that somebody actually took the time. And you just said, hey, wouldn't it be great? And you verbalized what you really wanted, which was to go to B School.
Yeah,
I think really cool.
I think that's such an important piece. It's like to say it out loud and say it to people, because you never know who's on the other side listening. You never know how they can contribute. And also, it's also that piece of accountability. I was talking to Celestine yesterday. She's a girl that I've coached, and they still I had a group coaching last year, and they still meet every month. And she was saying that just saying it out loud to the group helped her keep herself accountable. She had this idea of starting this other side business for years, but she never said it out loud. And so that kind of almost stopped her from taking action. But as soon as she shared it, she started to take action. So there's a lot of value in doing that.
So as you're doing B School, because I think it's like 6 weeks or something.
Like 8 weeks or something.
Yeah. It's a good chunk of time, and there's some time investment that you're having to put in. Were you able to juggle doing that? Because it's also about like diving into the community, which is something that from that you were able to make some other connections, which also got you work, and then it led to these long-term kind of clients. So it's not just about taking a class and doing the work. It's also about diving into the community that is there. So could you talk a little bit about like, what was life like? Were you juggling so much? Did you say, hey, I'm going to stop doing?
Yeah, like waking up at 6 a.m., doing all the client work, then catching the 8:30 a.m. bus, doing work on the train, then going to work, trying to like switch gears, like, okay, well, now I'm at work, need to do not think about my own stuff. And then leaving at 6, doing work on the train home, and sometimes working until midnight. Now, of course, this is not very sustainable, this rhythm of like midnight till 6 a.m., but I didn't have to do it for that long. And when it comes to like juggling, like being in the community and studying, I didn't study. Like, let's be honest. I would sometimes listen to the videos whilst working, but I wasn't paying that much attention. I was valuing much more the creating relationships and making connections over learning about business.
So how much time did you spend like in that time, so you're doing client work, you're doing your work for your job, and then you're also, when are you putting time in? Because I think that maybe people are like, oh, I've got to have like 4 hours a day to be able to do this. And I think that maybe that's a misconception. I think you could spend 4 hours a day doing it, but I think it sounds like you had you were juggling a lot. So how much time were you, and did you have to put in that really allowed you to make good connections? Do you remember?
Think about the time we procrastinate scrolling through social media in the evenings on the queue for Starbucks or, in the toilet.
Any liminal time you were using.
Any time that it would be that kind of time, I'd be like making friends. I'd be scrolling through the Facebook group. I'd be like, oh, someone needs help with a website. Let me just comment like, hey, I can help. Oh, someone is asking about which logo the group prefers. Let me show people that I am an expert in this and justify my decisions and, give value and just, I kept showing my face until I almost became, without wanting to sound vain, but almost became famous within the community because I was always helping whenever I saw someone. Yeah. And I was trying to give back and I was trying to show up and I was trying to like make friends, and I made some of my best friends in that group. Like I still talk to today.
Okay. So what does that look like? So what did it go to a DM and then you said, hey, let's jump on a call?
I always talk about networking like dating. Like if you're like, think all the way back to when you were at school and there's all these people and like, how do you make that first connection? Do you you don't invite them like, oh, come to my house later, let's have a play date. You don't dive in. So that's one thing. Like, I don't think you could ever dive in straight to the coffee. Like, oh, you look interesting. Let's jump on Zoom and have a virtual coffee. Like, no, you need to kind of earn their trust first. So I see it very much like dating. It's like you respond to their posts and then maybe you ask for the friendship and then maybe you like a couple of their posts and then if you see like, oh, they've commented back, that's like, here's my in to like message them like, oh, like, did that help? Did that comment help on the post? How did it go in the end with that difficult conversation you were talking about? Show genuine interest. Never go straight for the sale, because also you never know who are the relationships that are going to bring referrals in the future. Like one of my best friends that I made there, Laura Husson, she at the time had a development agency. So it made sense that we ended up no, actually before, she started with a Twitter course. And I remember I messaged her, I was like, I loved your Twitter course. Like it was a freebie. Like I took it, like I got this value. Like it was so great. Thanks for putting it out there for free. And she started messaging me back a lot. And I was like, oh, okay, well, I thought you were famous, like because she was a couple of years ahead of me in business. She had all these followers and I was really flattered that she was talking to me. Then later she decides to start a development agency and she needs design. So we start collaborating with a lot. But, now she's not even doing that anymore. And I still helped her with her branding. And then I put, actually Eva, who's here on the call, I put her in touch with Laura and they're now working together. And now that Laura is not doing websites anymore, she'll refer people to me. But that's because we have like a really solid friendship. Like I never reached out with the intent of, you're going to be a client one day, But also I always made an effort that whenever I did get on a call with someone, I would ask like, so where are you at in your business right now? Like, how can I help? Are you looking for copywriters? Maybe I know someone. Are you looking to get on podcasts? Maybe I can introduce you to Diane, things like that. And then they'll inevitably ask that in return. So when I was looking to get started with speaking, I was getting on the phone with all my clients and friends who had been on stages before, catching up. I would ask like, how can I help you? How can I support? I would try and give value. And then when they ask, well, what about you? Where are you at in your business? I would say, well, I'm really, really wanting to get on stages. I've never been on one. Like I really want to start. So if you know anyone, and that's how I got it to happen really fast.
So again, stating what you wanted, right?
Yeah, because people want to help.
Mm-hmm.
Like if I told you now, Diane, like I'm really like looking for, a designer to join our team, maybe you'd be like, oh, let me help you. Maybe there's someone in the community that I know.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I even
It's
know
like
people in Portugal.
Inevitably, like we inevitably want to help.
We do. I think I love how you said go back to school. So in school, there was not this ulterior motive like, oh, well, that he always brings Twinkies. I'm going to sit next to Dave because I want a Twinkie, like there wasn't that thing. But I also feel like it's what we have that isn't, maybe it's not connected to money, or it's not connected to anything, or it's something that we can share, but we're not losing anything by sharing. And I think that's what this is. I think you can fast track it to some extent. I think if you are on a call and somebody is saying something and you hear something, then you DM or you say, hey, what you said, but you have to be willing to speak to their vulnerability, and then you have to be willing to be vulnerable. It can't be like, oh, hi, I see that you're really having trouble with your mascara running. I sell mascara, right? That would be really insensitive. So it has to be, I think that making friends is not about a business thing. I think the business comes after. It's a byproduct of just really just loving on people. And I think that if you find people who are also really interested in growing their business, then there are things you'll be able to help them do, even if it's not design or whatever. You would be able to know, like you said, copywriters or web developers, or you have somebody who knows somebody because you are speaking to lots of people. So I think that's really important.
I was reading the comments and it's what Eva said, that like the biggest source of clients is like referrals and word of mouth. Like there's actually a statistic for that. I think it's like 90% or I'm going to butcher it, but like of B2B business is influenced by word of mouth referral. Like if people, like when I was looking for an architect or an interior designer, I didn't go Google it. I asked my friends who I knew had renovated their house, who's your architect? Did you enjoy working with them? Will you give me their contact?
Trusted sources, right? And that's why, like even in the B School Facebook group, people were asking in that group, what do you think about this for my logo? It wasn't like, hey, I just put this on Instagram. Let's just see what the bigger world thinks about this logo. Like that's never really a good idea, because again, you want to have a trusted community. So everybody who's in that had paid this money, they were focused, they were ready to get their business in the right way. So they could ask the right questions and hopefully help her or decide on her logo better. Right. So I think that having that trusted community, just like you were saying with an architect, this is stuff you're going to spend money on. And it's not just people who are just doing this as a hobby, right? These are people who are committed to their business, and you're in relationships with other people like that, right?
Yeah.
So you start, and you've been doing it for 6 years. You were young when you were starting, right? And you did something I think a lot of people do. Your first hire, do you want to tell them kind of about like just that? Well, maybe before you hired anybody, you had a relationship, you made a relationship with somebody, and from one of the things from B School. Do you want to tell them that little bit of that story? Do you know what story I'm talking about? The lady in New York where you go and.
Yes. Because there's so many.
I know there are. I've got them though.
That's where I really invested in, I invested in relationships, and I still do. Still today, it's the most important thing for my business. I've toyed with ads and Instagram strategy, but even last year, 90% of our business came from word of mouth referral. And I think it was 40% was repeat clients. So the story Diane is referring to is, so in B School, we got encouraged to reach out to someone of quote unquote influence. And I think there's value in also getting like someone of influence to be your client, because automatically it's like an instant trust factor, right? Like, oh, well, if Diane is her client, then we can like, if she's good enough for Diane, she's good enough for me. Like, let's get on a call. So I had been following this woman, Selena Sue, who was only in her second year of business as a publicist, but she was already getting, Danielle Laporte's book featured on Oprah, for example. Like, she was responsible for that happening. And so she was super connected and just starting out. So I was like, oh my God, how is this woman like getting in touch with all these like famous people in my eyes, like authors and experts and people of influence. And then she's also connected to the media. Like, if I could be her friend, like, it was so that's who I was like, okay, I'm going to reach out to Selena. I had already been reading all her newsletters and I was getting a ton of value from it. And so I started to reply to them, because a lot of people, they write in their newsletter, they'll ask a question and they'll invite you to reply. And we always think, okay, yeah, but are you really going to read it? I'm not even going to bother replying. And actually, it's surprising at like how no one replies. Like, I always say on podcasts, like, if you're listening to this, come and message me on Instagram. And it's very little, the amount of people that actually do. And I do reply to those. So yeah, don't think that just because someone is famous, they're out of reach. Like, do reply to all the newsletters.
And I just put your Instagram up there, which will be below if you're listening and watching. So keep going.
I started to reply to her newsletters like, oh, thank you. This was super helpful today in my conversation with my boss and quitting my job. And like, oh, thank you. Like, after reading this newsletter, I got to do this. And then one day I decided like, okay, like because she would reply, be like, oh, thanks for sharing with me. And then one day I was like, okay, I was working with this fashion designer and I thought that I could send Selena a dress and she could feature it in one of the newsletters and it'd be a win-win for everybody. And so I told my client about it, like, do you want me to make this happen? She was like, yeah, sure. Here's the dress. I sent it to Selena. I think that Selena ended up thinking that the dress came from me at the time, because I don't know. She was like, oh my God, Joanna, that's so generous. I'm like, yes, but it's from my client. She's like, yes, but tell me more about you, And so I was like, oh, well, I'm doing graphic design. I'm just starting as a freelancer. If you ever need any graphic design work, I'm happy to do the first couple of hours or the first job for free, because you've given me so much value. And it would be just such a pleasure to work with you. And she replied back. She was like, actually, my designer just called in sick and we have a sales page that needs to go live in 2 days. Can you make it happen? So those days I pulled all-nighters to make it happen. And I think she was really thankful for it. And that helped just foster a relationship. And a couple of weeks later, she posted a post on Facebook saying like, looking for an assistant for unpaid week. I don't know how she phrased it, but to help me with my mastermind event and for my 2-year business anniversary party. I was like, I want that. And I remember she messaged me. She's like, Joanna, this is an in-person job in New York, unpaid. You're in London. And I was like, yes, but I am willing to buy my ticket, to put myself in a hotel and to fly all the way out there and to do whatever errand you want me to, like pick up laundry or clean your floors, whatever, because I know that by being around you, I will learn so much. So if you'll have me, I'll be super professional. I'll bring a ton of value. And I would love the opportunity. And she said yes. And I remember I was so thrilled. It was so exciting. I was like, I'm going to New York. Like, yes. All out of pocket that I was able to pay, thankfully, through my clients that I was getting from B School. I flew there, and we ended up working on really fun stuff. And I was at her house from 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. And we started to become friends. And I ended up staying over because I was commuting to and from Brooklyn. And we would go out for dinners. She'd take me to the spa, and we just ended up becoming friends. To this day, I consider her a very good friend. And she, on the last, like the party, her 2-year anniversary party was at the very end of that week. And she ended up saying, like, actually, to my party, I want you to come as a guest. And we'll have someone, I'll bring in another assistant to assist with the party. And at that party, she had all her publicity clients. You know, there was Lewis House was there, and Jim Quick. He's like, I don't know if you've heard of him.
Sounds
like
familiar.
He's a brain trainer, and he works with like Will Smith and the X-Men, like all these famous people. And you know, who was there? Ramit Sethi, Derek Halpern. Like in the industry, these were all like huge names. And to be able to go to that party as a guest and be introduced by Selena, like, this is my friend Joanna, she's a great graphic designer. I think it's what set me up very early on with like all these big name clients, because a few of them became clients. And yeah, it was best decision. Like, I'm so glad I saw that Facebook post. And that's awesome. How I think I skyrocketed from there.
So then you're still in London. When did you move from London back to Portugal? And because I knew you said when you were in the very beginning, you were like, it was colder. I wanted to be warmer. It was sunny, and it closer to family, as well as you wouldn't have the commute. There would be more stability in just the kind of work-life balance that you were able to create.
Yeah. So we moved, my husband, who's my boyfriend at the time, he's also from Portugal, and we started to get inquiries for websites, and I was like, well, I don't develop. And he's like, well, I do. I'm like, really? And we started doing work together. We started to get booked out a lot of months in advance. And he's like, why don't we start hiring? And if we hire, why not in Portugal? And he was the one that suggested, like, we might as well end up moving there. You know, we could get office is cheaper there. Staff is cheaper, and we would be where we want to be, like next to our family, in the sun, great food, all the things. And I think it was April, we made that decision. We handed in our notice to our landlord, and I handed in my notice at work, and we were here in July of 2014.
Okay. So then you start hiring because you are booked out then, and you hired, this was kind of one of the things that you learned early that you would do different. You told me you would do it different now. So you hired 2 other designers that were about at the same level you were.
Yeah. So or like a year younger than me.
Right.
So,
but it wasn't like they were 10 years older. Art director had been doing this for, 25 years or something, right?
No. So I thought, like, okay, well, let's hire designers. But since I've never been a boss before, I'd rather hire someone younger than me, because this is like scary, and like, who am I to manage older people? And, just all these limiting beliefs that I had. And I went on Behance. I like saw a designer whose work I liked, and I could see that she was graduating that year. Messaged her. She was still finishing. She wasn't even done with university. It was like another month. And so I was like, okay, well, we'll wait until you're done, and then you can come work with us. That's how I made my first hire. And then I hired her friend. And I think what I had shared with you is that in retrospect, that's not what I would tell myself now. Firstly, there's nothing wrong. There's only advantages with hiring people older than you. They've been around doing what they do for longer. They might have been in different companies. They're going to be more experienced in knowing how you can structure your business. Like, 4 years later, I learned that when I hired our our project manager, is now also operations manager, Joanna, and she had been in the industry doing project management and other, like, so many other things for 10 years longer than I had. And when she came to the business, she was able to say, like, okay, oh, you don't have systems. Okay, well, let me set this all up for you. Like, oh, you don't have, like, for example, legally we need to have like that little sign over there saying that it's a electric thing. All the things, like, she helped us. Like, I felt so grown up after hiring her. I was like, oh, like, okay, this is what it should feel like. Like, when I hired the designers, I felt like I had to work more to delegate and be able to, like, make sure they knew what they were doing. Whereas when I hired Joanna, I felt like I had to work less. Like, it's such a different feeling when you hire someone senior and experienced. It's like they immediately are able to take things off your plate.
Because they know how to do things you didn't even know you were missing doing, right? And so that was this, it could have been in hiring somebody that was at your same level or lower, or even if it's like same skills, like if you're a letterer and you hire another letterer that letters very similar to you, it just leaves that your options for your company is more limited. It would be better if you hired somebody who maybe also lettered, but in a different style than you. So then you have more things to offer those clients, or again, skills that you didn't even know to even think about. But I think sometimes our first instinct is they'll see that we don't know what we're doing, right? And then the fraud will be out, and then, but really it's the only way to really grow, right? If you don't know how to do something, you need to get on if you're trying to go up a hill, you need to have the right shoes or the right bike or whatever it is to get up that hill, instead of just trying to do it in heels, whatever it is that you have at your disposal. So Anna had a question about B School real quick. Would you recommend B School?
It depends where you're at in your business. So I think if you're someone starting out from scratch, I think it's great to do. But there's so many other courses out there now, it's like, I recommend a lot from The Future. I also recommend a lot from 1-6 Creative. So yeah, go see what B School has to offer and see if that's in line with where you're at in your business. And if you're looking to invest in like courses, do look for, and if you're looking to have an experience similar to mine where you're able to get clients from the course, then try and look for courses that are more diverse in terms of who they attract. Because if you take a course that is just for graphic designers and you're a graphic designer, you're not going to get your clients from there. But if you take a course you could even take a course on like how to set up your own e-commerce store if what you want is e-commerce clients because you love packaging. Like, that'd be a good investment. And study about their business so you're able to give value when you're working on their branding and packaging, That's something to consider.
That's a great insight. Again, seeing where you could also bring value, but also, that now you understand their pain points, and there are going to be some things that you'll be able to help them with. So you're making relationships, but strategically making relationships. So it does seem like you were pretty strategic even at the beginning of your business. How long until you hired the project manager?
I can't quite remember. I think it was 2. I said 4 years, but I think it was like 2 to 3. I'm not sure.
So the designers you had, they stayed for about a year. And then what did you learn from that kind of, because it's a relationship. It's not like anybody probably left in a bad way, but there's things that you learned about being a boss. You also learned things that one of what I called it was delegate responsibilities, not tasks. And I think, was that one of the things you learned in that first year when you hired people?
Oh gosh, like where to begin? What did I not learn in the first year? But I think if we're focused on just like the big lessons, and one of them is make sure that you create an environment where people feel safe to kind of manage up as well. Tell you what they need from you to be able to do their job right, or to tell you why they're not happy with what they're doing right now. And I don't think I ever created that space in my first year with the two girls that I hired. I never once, I think, asked them, what would you change about the way we do things? I never thought that that was something that could be hugely beneficial. But now I'm always asking my team, like, what do you think of this process? Is it working for you? And maybe it's working for the designers, but not for the project manager. And so she'll tell me, and like, okay, well, let's fix it. And I'm always letting them come to the table, or I hope they feel that way. I know Enrique is tuning in live. He's a designer at Gift Design Studios. So I'm always trying to make room for them to feel safe and like sharing that. How do you do that? I know Enrique in particular, he's very open. Sorry?
How do you do that? Because I think sometimes there's that boundary that people don't want to step because it's your boss and you don't know if she really means that or if she just is saying that, right? How do you make it so that they really do feel like that you've created a place? And I know it's built in trust, but how are some of the first things, what are some of the things that you do when somebody new comes in so that you can help them to understand that that's part of the culture?
Oh, you tell them. So there are different ways. Like I will tell them now, like, okay, so the thing that I value most in our working relationship is transparent communication. If there's ever a point where you're feeling really, really stressed because we threw too much on your plate, please do tell us, because sometimes we're not aware and we can fix it. And we don't want you to feel stressed. If there's ever like a conflict, if there's ever anything you don't agree with, please do tell us, because we're always looking at ways to improve. Now, of course, there will be more delicate things that, they might not feel as safe to tell me. I know from like 7 years of running a team that sometimes they hold things inside for a while before they have the courage to tell me. So I try and do it in different ways. Sometimes I will get on a call with them just one-on-one, because they might feel safer than sharing it in front of the whole team, and really ask them like, and how are you feeling about that? And I noticed you were feeling a little bit stressed, like in this project. What do you think it was about that project? And how could we have done it differently? More recently, I did a written form when I came back from maternity leave, asking like, what worked better when I was away? Because I'm sure that I'm sometimes messing things up. And they're like, yeah, we ship designs a lot quicker because you don't have to like keep sending them back. And then what didn't work so well? I'm like, oh, well, the social media, like we needed more of your guidance and what to post and things like that. And I found that during the written form, like one designer in particular, she opened up a lot. So for her, I realized that written form was better. So, I'm always learning. Like now I'm going to be trying like all these different ways. Cause I remember at the beginning when I read Radical Candor, which is a great book on leadership. And that's when I first really understood the benefits and the concept of managing up. And I remember I started to like host these meetings where I asked like, okay, who has anything they want to share about what's not working in the business? And everybody would go quiet. And I knew in my heart, because I could feel there was tension in the team. I was like, oh, but there are things that are wrong and people aren't telling me. And I didn't know why, like I didn't, I was like, oh, well, clearly I didn't make it safe enough for them to share. Or maybe I'm talking about this when it's too late and people don't even have the faith that it's something that could be fixed. But because we have gone through times like that, times where no one in the team was really happy. And that's really hard as a leader, to know that you've created this business and given all these jobs, and there's tension. You feel the tension. You feel like some of the systems aren't working. People aren't really vibing with how the project flow, the clients, the things. And you start to think like, oh, but it's all my fault. Like, I hired you. I brought you here. Like, I created the systems and all the things. But we go through it. We got through it. The team looks very different now as well. Like, there's so many. Running a team is the most rewarding part of having a business, I find, and also the hardest part. It's also the most time-consuming part, at least for me.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Hannah had a question. She said, have you ever had a senior designer or designers that are, or somebody else in your business that's, they have more experience than you, and they might treat you disrespectfully because of that? And she said, it sounds like you've hired excellent designers that have been really helpful, but just curious how you've handled that or how you would handle that.
There have been instances where I have felt like I was treated disrespectfully, but I don't ever think it was because they were more experienced than I was, because I always recognize that. I would always say, like, what do you think about this design? Because you have way more experience than I do, because you've won awards, and because you've done this project that was amazing. Like, what do you think? At the end of the day, I get it. Like, maybe it's annoying that I get to have the last word, but when I do have the last word, I'm more thinking in terms of what will the client think? I never nitpick the actual technical design aspects. But when I was treated disrespectfully, I think it was because there was conflict in the team, and I let that escalate beyond control. And there was a lot of factors here. Not going into too much detail, just to respect everyone in the team, but we grew too quickly. Things got out of hand. I stopped having time for everyone, and I feel like I might have left the team kind of figuring to figure it out on their own, and that must have not felt nice. And so maybe they had good reason to be fed up with how things were. And so, tension builds, people start to get snappy. And then, but if I am ever treated disrespectfully, I will pull them aside and I will ask, that was not cool. That cannot happen again. Is everything okay? Because sometimes you never know, maybe they're going through a lot of tough things at home. And so when that happens, I'll just make sure and I'm not great at doing this. I'm learning, but first you want to catch it right away. And you want to make sure that everybody realizes no, this person stepped the line. It is not okay. Let's pull them aside. And then it's understanding what's on the other side, what's happening there. I think when this happened, maybe 2 or 3 times in 7 years of running a team. And I would ask them more often than not, they'd be like, okay, well, sorry, I exploded, but this is not working, or this, and this is making me really angry, or I have this going on at home. And I'll say, okay, but it is not cool. It is not cool to do that. You cannot do that again. But it sounds like you need to go home, go cool off, go take a break, go relax, come back fresh tomorrow morning, or maybe I don't know, take a week, because we cannot have that, because that can be contagious, right? And I am guilty of this. I know that sometimes I can get stressed, and that sometimes affects the team. So I have to also always be careful of what is my state of mind, so I don't infect everyone else with it. So yeah, it's just think about family dynamics at home. It ends up being the same in a business, and you have to juggle it all and juggle all the different personalities, and and
the client.
It's a challenge.
So it's all and that, but client. It sounds like you you do lean into some of your intuition. So you're reading body language in a meeting, whether it's with your team or whether it's with a client, and whether it's a conversation you had with the client, so that you know that they aren't going to probably like this other thing, and you forgot to communicate it, or you didn't realize that until you saw what had been done or something. And some of that's just, it's just life. It just happens. But it sounds like what I think you've done a really good job is that from the get-go, you appreciate and you recognize people for their expertise and what they're really good at. And you're not talking down to them. You're also telling them by showing them that you're changing things and you're willing to adjust things all the time. How's this doing for you? Is this working for you? Is this, so it's that Tony Hsieh kind of Zappos feel that if you don't like change, you probably wouldn't have liked working at Zappos, because we're always trying to get it better. Right. And so they wanted to give a lot of confidence to those employees, which in our field, a lot of places are not confidence builders, they're confidence destroyers. They put you in a place so that you feel like you have to have them, you need them that you're nothing without this, whatever. Right. So I think that you've set up and maybe it's just that you tell them, yes, but you also show them in how you're interacting with the team in every interaction, when you're doing client meetings or in between, or that sounds like you're always trying, but it can be very hard because you never really get to let your guard down. You can't it's just like being a mom, I guess, probably, like you can't ever really take off that hat. You are it, and that's how it is. Right.
Yeah. Leadership is challenging in so many ways, because you have to and it's leadership in the team. And also, like, now that my Instagram audience grows, I feel like I have this sense of responsibility. Like, okay, well, how do I want to show up? Who is the Joanna that I would look up to? I know Lady Gaga, I think it's Lady Gaga who says, like, I want to be, what did she say? Like, I want to be the kind of person that I want to go to bed with, or something like that, like, who do I have to, what would the Joanna that I would admire, how would she react to this right now?
It's a good question. Another good question for us to ask.
Yeah.
Matt had a question. Yeah. And is there a different approach to hiring, like, administrative assistant or somebody in an administrative role in your company compared to somebody doing design, or maybe a contractor, somebody who's doing art for you?
I think when you're hiring someone, you need to get very clear on what are the responsibilities they're going to absorb. And for those responsibilities, what kind of person do you need for that job? So for a project manager, what is the responsibility? Like, okay, well, the project manager has to oversee the team and communicate with the client and make sure that the projects are delivered on time and on budget. And so, that the skills they need to have is they need to be like, they need to be finishers instead of like a person like me who's a quick start. I love to start things. I never really see them through until the end, unless I've got someone like a project manager helping. They need to have like great attention to detail. They need to be great communicators. They need to love organization and Excel spreadsheets and all the things. And so, yeah, you start to like get clear on like, okay, this is what I need. But actually, like, I got really lucky. I was introduced to Joanna, our project manager, by a designer who was working for us, because I didn't even know to hire a project manager. But he was like, look, it looks like you're not having a lot of time because there was 4 designers at the time. Looks like you don't have a lot of time to like do all the emailing, all the scheduling, all the meetings, and then still help us with creative direction. So I think you need someone like my friend. Can you like talk, like, why don't I set up a meeting? And, I think she was interviewing me more than I was interviewing her in retrospect. She was at a great job. And she needed to know, like, okay, well, there's this like 24-year-old girl who's like considering hiring me, and she like I don't know what was going through her mind at the time, but in retrospect, I think she might have thought things like that. Like, is this business really gonna survive? Like, am I leaving a good job to risk it all right now? So we had like, I think 2 or 3 meetings, long meetings before we both we're like, okay, let's do this. And I think a lot of it was her interviewing me.
One of the big things that I wanted to talk about, that we're almost out of time, so we'll have to do a part 2. But one of the big things was that you productize your services. So there's a whole bunch of things with automation that you've done, but then just productizing your service, was that from her coming in, or was that stuff you were learning on your own and then you were able to actually implement it because you had somebody else to project manage the projects?
I think it was a combination. I think she brought a lot of things to the table in terms of like starting to create systems, because immediately she's like, okay, well, because we had already productized the brand identity package. Mm-hmm. Very early on, I was told to read Built to Sell, mm-hmm. which I highly recommend to any service provider, even if you don't have a team, and even if you never plan on selling, because it's how to kind of package your services in a way that they're easy to sell, and then easy to execute, and then easy to delegate to. So I already had that kind of figured out. But then she came in and started like writing the processes. So she's like, okay, well, we get a lead in who wants to work with us. What do we do? What's step 2? I'm like, oh, well, you email them to get on a call with me. Okay. So she wrote the email template. She saved it as a Gmail template. And, with a click, every time there's a lead, it's like, okay, this. Okay. They say yes, they signed a contract. What is first step? Okay, well, normally I send them so I had all of this in my head, but right. She put it down on paper, and she documented it and found ways to make it better. And so so it's funny because then we revisited the book. The author of the book is
Built. So I'll look it up real quick. Keep talking. I'll
Dan Warrilow or something like that. So we revisited that recently when I found out I was pregnant. I was like, let's read this book together again and discuss how to implement more to make it even more automated. So one of E-Myth is E-Myth is similar as well. Yes, it's a great book. So we were like, okay, well, I'm not going to be able to take sales calls. How can we make your job easier to close people on the phone? And so we put together like, okay, well, what is the flow? Because normally they'll ask like, I'm interested in working with you guys. And then they get on a call with me, and then I explain the whole thing. And we're like, okay, well, let's explain all of that in a PDF. Let's explain all our process in a PDF. And let's already have like, this is how much it costs. This is how long it is. All the frequently asked questions were in there. And it's like, does this sound like what you want? Well, then the next step is to book a call. And on that, the intention of that call is to figure out the timeline of your project and just for the final okay. So people were showing up to the call knowing that by booking a call, they had already committed. This was a yes. They had already read through everything, and they were just showing up to the call to find out, when can you slot me into your calendar? So Joanna was able to have these calls, close the business, send them the proposal, oversee the whole project. Yeah. And I know some of the clients I never even met, which is crazy.
So without you in that, because you took off 4 months for maternity leave, and you said, this was one of the things that you told me last time we met. You were like, it was not like it just survived. It thrived. It did better at some things. And so I love that when you came back, you were like, what worked, what didn't work. And so they told you, and like that it got out faster, that things were released quicker, right? And I think that there's something to that. But then they also told you where they really struggled, where your guidance really needed to be there. So again, it helps make your business more efficient, and they feel more ownership. They feel like they're a more critical part of what the business is and how the business moves and changes and grows. So
I hope they think that too.
productizing your the branding offering. But then what about those people that are still having questions that they read through the whole PDF, but they still had, or they wanted more custom? Is that something that you still would take, or would that be at a different price? Like, when are you, like, do you give them that kind of like contract where they're signing it and this is how much it's going to cost after you do the timeline, because you don't really know until then? Or is
Yeah. So if it's the branding, the contract is a template as well. And it takes 5 minutes. Like, we timed it 5 minutes to like input the dates, get all the fields done, and the proposal shipped out to the client. So we always tell our clients, if you don't go through this first, we generally don't take you on. Like, if you already have an existing brand identity and you just want us to create like packaging, like put it on a box, we don't do. If we didn't do the brand identity ourselves. If you want us to do a website without the brand identity piece, we don't do. So we always say, like, this is the way in to become our client. You have to go through this process. And so that makes it really easy to like onboard new clients. Now, existing clients, when I was away, did come back, and they already know Joanna, so they'd be like, hey, we're launching, like, now that, there's a pandemic and we can't do our events anymore. We're doing this online event. We need like this landing page. Here's the copy. How much is it? When can you make it happen? And that's when we really involve the team. So Joanna will look at like the team and who has capacity, and she'll ask them like, how long do you want for this? And she'll maybe add in a couple more hours just for buffer. She will like put in, she knows what is our target per hour and how much profit we should be making, all of that. And she will then get back to the client with the information that the team have given her. And I think that's really cool, because the designers, they know that they're the ones that set the timelines and they're the ones that set the estimates. So there's like, we're not throwing them in the deep end. We're all in this together.
So I'm going to ask this last question. Rafi had a great, he says, so he's enjoying this for sure. So is the contract or template bespoke, or is it a part of your project management software?
We wrote it all with our lawyer, and we keep adding to it. Like, every nightmare client, we're like, oh my God, like they did this, they disappeared on us. We need to add this in. We use PandaDoc. That's the software. It doesn't have to be that. I know a lot of people now are using Dubsado. I think
Dubsado. Yeah.
Sado. Yeah. And so we wrote it. So it's bespoke in the sense that it's custom to us, and we wrote it, but then it's the same for every client. So then we just swap out the dates. And
then that's where you are able to productize or automate, because everybody goes through that same process. Because if you did have something that happened with a nightmare, or a designer's like, hey, we really need this in there, then you would write it in so that they would be answering those questions in something. Do they still, the designers, would they meet with the client, or just Joanna?
We're playing around with this. We're playing around. So I think when I was on maternity leave, it'd always be like Joanna and a designer, so that they had like the technical aspect on the call as well. We're now seeing like what would make sense. Like, do I even need to get on a call still? So we're still like, we always revisiting our systems and the way we do things. And now that we have some more senior designers in the team, then maybe we're going to change it up again. So I don't think there's a right or wrong answer.
Is it all the time, or is it quarterly you say, hey, we're doing this, we're going to reevaluate? Or is it after every project you kind of reevaluate?
I wish I was that organized that it's like, let's do a quarterly review. And that's whenever something doesn't feel right. Whenever like we keep like things get lost in communication, or like, God, the same thing keeps happening every project where we go through this and the client disappears on us. Okay, well, let's build that into the, not only is it in the contract, but now let's reinforce it with every email. Like, you've got 2 business days to give us feedback, or this happens. In terms of project management software, we are now working with Notion. So we got it all custom built for us with Molly at Notionology. We tried other things in the past, but they didn't really work. But I think the most important piece is like a good process, and where you've gone through every step of the process and looked at like, okay, well, the first step is to get on a call. Well, we're spending like about 6 emails back and forth to get on the call. Well, let's use Calendly. Okay, that solved that problem. Okay, I'm spending about 5 minutes writing this email, but it's pretty much the same every time we onboard a new client. Okay, well, let's create it into a Gmail template. Shave that time off. Like there's always things we can refine. Like even now we're looking at how can we make exporting the final logos faster. And there's like a great extension, the logo Illustrator expander extension. I don't know the name, but the logo package, I think.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
And it's great. It saves hours. So we're always looking at like, how can we be more efficient so that we have more time for the stuff that matters, like for the creative, coming up with ideas and doing research. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I agree too. This is awesome. I want to make sure you guys know how to get in touch with Joanna, and you guys can you can message her on Instagram if you go, and I'm putting all of those in. So her website is giftdesignstudios.com, GIF. And then on Instagram, it's Joanna, JoannaGalvao design. It's just Joanna Galvao design. Yeah. I know, but then I said it with a D and I was like, well, I should have just spelled the whole word design. Anyway, it doesn't matter. Joanna, thank you so much for doing this. I super appreciate that you were able to share that you have such a great attitude of learning and growing, and that you're willing to share when things didn't always go right, and that you are willing to admit that things don't always go right, and that you're always willing to make that. But it is hard. It's hard to always have that hat on. And I know you got 4 months, but I know there were sleepless nights, but they weren't due to a client or an all-nighter. It was baby all-nighters. So I'm just very thankful to know you, and you just are really inspiring. So I didn't get all my questions, but we'll just have to have you back on to get the rest of those answered. But thank you for doing it. And thank you guys for coming early. And we're taking next week off, but then the week after that, we'll be back. And Andrew Burnett from Scotland will be talking to us about naming. And because we all think, we could probably come up with something, but there's so much more to everything. It
is hard.
It is super hard. And especially if it's kind of like, these are things that we feel like we can do when we're early in the game. But then when we realize all these other things, it's like putting a business together. You just don't realize what you don't know. So having somebody who is an expert in this thing, it's so great to have them on the team to do that, to handle that, so that, because you didn't know all the pitfalls that you can go through when you're starting a business, or you're hiring someone, or you're trying to automate your systems, or project manage, or all the things that go into that. But I love your leadership style, and I just wish you all the luck, and I can't wait to have you back. Joanna, thank you so
much for having me, Dan.
Thank you. And we'll see you guys in 2 weeks.